Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whenever you happenstance into this incredible dialogue with the great new Untouchables. And we're recording this on Friday, May 15th, 2025, at approximately 3 p.m. my time. And first, I'd like to welcome back June Carbone and Bill Black from Norway, a quick trip to the other side of the world. And of course, say hello to Mark, Dan, and Paul Peltier. And I will, of course, include their bios and links to their information and websites and so forth, and their prolific writings and everything else that we bring to the table every week. But as we move forward, I think the first question I want to ask is to the newly returned folks from across the pond. What's the perception in well, it wouldn't be the shit countries as Donald Trump, had referred to them before. The Scandinavian countries. What's the outlook from Europe, looking back here at the mess that we've got on our hands?
Go ahead, Bill.
Horrified. Pretty much universally horrified. Most people incredibly surprised that it could happen so quickly. And in the United States, causing them to reappraise a vast number of things. And just in terms of this conference, which was an international family law conference, the degree that in the modern era, picking your site where you can actually have people come safely and not risk being, stopped by the border types is now a major thing in putting on an international conference. It's just horrifying.
Which, to be clear, means scheduling things in the United States as opposed to, say, Canada has become much trickier. And I will say, one of the things that was quite striking is among the people who are most paranoid are the Americans. So the comment after we got back is, did you have any trouble getting through customs? Now, I will say we arrived in Norway. We went to the line that said nothing to declare, and without talking to a single person, we're quickly on the street. And coming back to Minneapolis took a little longer, but no greater difficulties. But the number of people who are paranoid, asking questions like, do I need a burner phone when I go abroad? Do I need to scrub various things I'm taking with me, like my laptop hard drive? And questions of that kind Americans have never asked before. And some of it is paranoia, but some of the people, hey, if you're a professor, you're active on social media, you publish all kinds of things, you have everything on your laptop, and who knows what this administration thinks is controversial.
Wow.
The biggest question I have is, having gotten over there, why'd you come back? Just kidding.
The fight.
Good.
Well, it's been a crazy week here, obviously, while you were gone, and I'm sure you couldn't escape some of the news, starting with the insanity of Qatar, the 747, everything with the emoluments clause, and of course, just outright corruption. But further to that, I mean, I just saw a headline right before we pushed record that Democrats are galvanizing to try to, I guess, block a spending bill for a $3 billion arms package to Qatar. And the first thing that popped into my mind was, outside of knowing that I think there's a significant U.S. military base in Qatar, why would Qatar need $3 billion in armaments? Is that anything that anybody has any understanding of, considering their relationship, of course, with all things that have been happening in Gaza? Go ahead, Bill.
To be clear, Patrick, I think the reason, at least that I heard, that they were trying to block it is that it included a package of AI chips, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what the problem that the Democrats have with it, that we're giving, people who have in the past sponsored terror, AI chips that would far advance anything that they have over there in the Middle East. I think that's why.
Well, I appreciate that insight because look, did you guys see who was on the invite list to all of the meetings that were taking place in Saudi Arabia? I mean, in addition to, of course, Larry Fink of BlackRock and Steven Schwartzman of Blackstone. We had the CEO of NVIDIA. It was like a who's who of techno, the techno, you know, financialized strata of military industrial complex, all, I guess, paying fealty to their client state, Saudi Arabia. I mean, that is pretty telling considering what you were just talking about in terms of AI.
It's actually somewhat different. Saudi Arabia is the great opponent of Dubai, and Dubai is very worried about a more powerful series of its neighbors taking over the country. Simultaneously, Dubai has become the go-to place for all the sleazy UK folks to leave if they're afraid of prosecution and they want to do more aggressive money laundering and such. But Dubai is also associated with the closest thing to a freer press in the Arab world. And so the Saudis in particular hate them. I mean, there's some reasons, both good and bad, why the leadership of Dubai is worried about military attacks from its neighbors. It's already been under severe economic efforts, embargoes from its most powerful Arab neighbors.
Well, I mean, to me, the most telling thing is, obviously Donald and his, reverting back to make America great again, using the fossil fuel spigot to lead the way, right? Led him right back to whatever that relationship is with Saudi, as we all know, as a religious theocracy and blended monarchy, right? And so it seems like that's an appearance of what MAGA and Christo-fascism is trying to accomplish here with the corruption that we're about to express. But if you have a statement, go ahead.
Yeah, so again, most of my work as a white collar criminologist is about how elite, corrupt people hide their corruption. But Trump has transcended that. And what he's setting up is a bidding war deliberately, in which he wants publicity about how he's on the take. He wants everybody to be, well, they gave you this 400 billion, I'll give you 2 billion type of thing. So he wants the publicity and he wants to create a Gresham's dynamic in which bad ethics drives good ethics out of the marketplace for bribery of CEO of not only by CEOs but heads of states.
It's paint by the numbers, but we've seen, and I've seen this week, for example, that the Trump family organization has pocketed $3 billion from crypto proceeds over the course of the last 100 days. In addition to, I'm going to just leave this hanging here. You're telling us that can I interpret that the 747 is part of that, race to the bottom? I mean, to advertise
that's the opening ante.
That's what I thought you meant by that. Oh my gosh. So here
that's what Trump is trying to establish.
Wow. So I didn't even think
you can't play in this game unless you're talking in billions and billions of dollars.
Right. And then plus we got the 3 billion for the crypto assets. And at the same time, we've got this insane genius, what they call genius. I can't believe the audacity of that legislation. While at the same time in this reconciliation bill, it looks like it's a giveaway again, and reduce taxes of the uber wealthy, while of course decimating all of the programs for those that are in desperation. So you can't paint a clear picture.
And that comes back to what David Kay and I have been emphasizing. Trump is a terrible businessman. So he gives away trillions of dollars that he could get, right? He doesn't care that he's negotiating a terrible deal on the part of the American people. because they're in the American people. What does he care? If he ends up with what is chump change from the standpoint of the literally nearly trillionaire predatory class, and he gets 2 billion out of it, well, man, this is a guy that labored all his life. I put the laboring part in quotation marks, and has far less money than if he had simply taken his dad, the inheritance he got from his dad, and the support even before his dad's death from his dad, and put it into a mutual money market mutual fund. He'd be far wealthier than he is today because he is such a crappy businessman.
Yeah, without that collateral consequence. Mark, what stands out to you this week in term, or Paul, I should say? I apologize. I'm going to circle back because I want to build this to what we talked about yesterday, Mark. But Paul, what stands out to you from some of the insanity that you've seen on display this week?
Well, just to follow up on the thread of Bill, first of all, what they're doing is normalizing this grift, right? They are normalizing this grift. And they can do it better when the Justice Department is on their side, right? So the Justice Department has been corrupted, and through the, Bondi will do anything he says. So no one is going to, at least from a legal perspective, a federal legal perspective, challenge it. Obviously, in terms of the emoluments clause, there are legislators and other people who might have standing to challenge this in that regard. But the whole normalization of this grift has been going on for a long time by him, and he's doing it basically unchallenged. And I think that the Democrats are really missing a huge opportunity here to jump on the dichotomy that Bill just said. And what's that dichotomy? He's making all these deals for billionaires, and not anything that he's doing benefits the American taxpayer. As a matter of fact, he's telling them they have to tighten their belts, have $2 instead of $30, 3 pencils instead of 500 pencils, because he's such a moron. But that's what the Democrats, if they stop chasing the sort of shiny object around the room, if they would focus on what in fact is going on to the real person, to the Main Street American here, and how they're getting screwed. I think that if we're all waiting for the law and order to come down on Donald Trump, that's not going to happen. It's not happening for the next 4 years. So we've got to find ways, and certainly the Democratic Party or some leaders in that part have to find a way to let the Americans know how this grift is not helping them at all, and do it in a way that brings Main Street Americans back on the side of the Democrats, who they lost in the last election. Anyway, that's my overall view of what's going on, at least this week.
Well, not to mention that plays into what June has laid out for us over the course of the last several months, particularly as it relates to honor. I think I saw a news report that throughout all of this other stuff that it's hard to keep up with, that Pam Bondi had received infusions from, I believe, Qatar directly.
Not her firm. Her firm. That's what she's saying. It was her firm.
Yes, she was a registered foreign lobbyist for Qatar.
I know. The whole thing's nonsense.
And she's now the Attorney General of the United States a month later.
Yep.
Well, and this dialogue plays in, Mark, to what you've been talking about the last several weeks, especially as it relates to what the Democrats can do besides calling you and asking for money to take advantage of the opportunity to galvanize an initiative. And we spoke yesterday. I don't know if you want to maybe bring this up at the moment, but we spoke at length with your colleague David Marbury, who is an expert, of course, in all things First Amendment law, but as it relates to transparency and the things that we discussed that would lead us to understand that these giant tech platforms, there's a couple of different strategies to take them on, but it's really a mess. What would be your first initiative, Mark, in terms of?
Well, yeah, I mean, let's go to first. Let's go to 50,000 feet here. The paradigm of corruption has completely changed in 4 months in America. The paradigm that we all came up in, and the reason that you found us for the con was a paradigm of people hiding their corruption, and the people that were the crime fighters uncovering it and exposing it and explaining it. And journalists, that the whole American, going back to Deep Throat and the Watergate, the modern journalists, the modern investigative journalists, their entire life has been dedicated to unearthing exactly the type of behavior that the Trump administration has put out front. And so it's a little I'm a little taken aback, and I think all of the things that we know have to go out the window here, because we are not prepared, and America is not prepared, and frankly, I'm not sure the Constitution is prepared for a paradigm of this open, obvious, notorious corruption. At the end of the day, this guy, watching Howard Lutnick defend the tariffs, talking about how, which again has turned out to be exactly what we said it was going to be, a big grift for exceptions. It was an opportunity. It was an opportunity to shake down various industries and individuals to get their exemptions that they wanted to the tariffs, and he'll continue to raise them and lower them because it's a money making enterprise, and it doesn't require skill or talent. It just requires a black heart, which is what we have, which is what we elected to the White House. But talking about how we're going to reshore all this manufacturing into these great high tech factories. Well, at the end of the day, the people that I know that voted for Trump because he promised to bring back a world where they could get a job with their high school degree, and make a living and support their family and do better than their parents did. None of those people will have jobs in those high tech factories. And at some point, they're going to have to figure it out. And I think we're going to have to help them. And the Democrats have done just a terrible job. I mean, if they collude with the Republicans on this crypto bill that's pending, which is to basically legalize open and notorious fraud in the crypto industry, I give up hope. I think the Democratic Party is dead. That could be the death of the Democratic Party, in their hopes of ever providing an answer to the public that anybody would ever believe again. And it's mainly because their campaign committees and their PACs have been enriched, and their consultants have been enriched by the industry at a scale that is unprecedented in history. I mean, I'm the only politician on this panel, but the amount of money that is flowing into these dark money PACs, and the amount of direct gratuity that is being paid back to those donors is just unimaginable. I mean, it would make former speakers of the Ohio House blush, and they were some of the most corrupt people that I've ever met in my life. But they had shame, and they did their best to hide that corruption, and waited till Paul Pelletier and Bill and June came along to expose them. And if Bill and there weren't enough Bills and Junes and Pauls out there, then they got away with it. And I hate to call that the good old days, but this is different. This is not a sideshow or a byproduct of this administration. It is the point. The point is to use this to enrich he himself and those who will support his continuation in power. I mean, I forgot to mention the money that Musk put in more than with matching funds. There's still a statute that allows matching funds for federal presidential candidates. Musk himself put more into the election than would have been allowed by the Treasury under the federal matching funds law that was created in response to the Watergate controversies in the 70s. I mean, that's the proportion of that we're dealing with here, and so this is the consequence of allowing this huge gap to grow between the rich and the poor, and for the folks that are supposed to be representing the working class and middle class people of this country, they've been abandoned. So and until they figure out that the guy sitting around that table with Trump talking about his big beautiful new plane, were all the guys that put them out of their jobs. I mean, Steve Schwartzman and what was these hedge fund and private equity guys have put millions and millions of Americans out of business, out of jobs. And every day we have Joanne Fabrics here. It's been in this community for 75 years. And wonderful people who I know made their living working at Joanne Fabrics, both in the stores, where you could make an honest living, get health insurance, and take care of your family, and in the corporate aspects of it. They're all out of jobs today because of these guys, and they're the ones that are the winners in this. And instead of pretending that they care, they're not even pretending anymore. So the question is, what do we do? I mean, yesterday we were talking to David Marburger about, he's an expert in public records. Well, public record, I don't need to do public records requests anymore. I spent 2 years litigating a public records case that I finally won to get the teacher's pension to reveal the details of their private equity investments that they've refused to reveal to the teachers and retired teachers that are part of the plan. Because they're still trying to hide it. They haven't caught up yet to this new paradigm that's going on. I mean, that's how we used to do it. That's how I did the CoinGate investigation and scandal in Ohio, was by public records cases, lawsuits enforcing the public records cases, bringing lawsuits against people that were resisting that were enriching themselves, whether it's Ketam or other mechanisms. That's all out the window, and journalists don't know what the hell to do either. Because I read these summaries from five or six different publications every day, and I'm becoming immune to the outrage that I would feel for any one of those stories.
That's a great bleed into you, June, because what Mark had talked about was identifying the new economy and the realities of it. And of course, you've spent a lot of time and research and expertise in delivering that in some of your recent books. Can you pick up on where Mark left off?
Sure. First, some good news. Upset win for mayor of Omaha, Nebraska. And what was his slogan? His opponent was running all these, was yelling trans, the new equivalent of the N-word, as to how to win campaigns. And he ran his counter ads saying, she's interested in potties. I'm interested in fixing potholes. Exactly the point we're making. Secondly, I think you have to see this as a process. I have a student who've written a paper this semester, going back and tracing the history of campaign finance. And it sounds just like Bill. First, you've got these Supreme Court decisions watering things down. Then you neuter the agency in charge of enforcement. Then Trump comes in, fires the people, and denies them funding. You have laws that are difficult to enforce, and you make them impossible to enforce. And if you want the Musk Doge agenda, it is, how do you neuter all the people who do enforcement, especially if it involves Tesla? So you've got this. We've talked about corruption being out in the open. Yes, Trump is for sale. Trump has made it clear his entire career he is for sale. What is not fully visible is these campaign finance violations. So there are a considerable group of people who think Sherrod Brown in Ohio, and I leave to Mark any expertise on Senate races in Ohio, and Senator Tester in Wyoming lost because they dared offend the crypto boys. the amount of money flowing into those states, and Wyoming is a lot easier, I mean, to flood with money than Ohio. But still, what you've got is there's considerable opinion out there that that's what doomed them. And that has been internalized by the Democrats in Congress. After all, part of the discussion is how many people understand crypto? How many people think it was like Tesla before Doge? I mean, the number of people who I know who thought Tesla is this great progressive scientific breakthrough. And I used to go to conferences with Bill where the audience is talking about how crypto and Bitcoin are the great libertarian alternatives to the state. How many people understand that it's nothing but a Ponzi scheme? Again, breaking through. And we have to then connect it to the potholes. Listening to the Bulwark's effort to recruit a younger audience, they start talking about crypto. Now, they start talking about crypto by guys who understand what crypto is. And what's their take? Hey, the people who feel the men, let's say this is a very male thing, who feel they're on the losing end of the spectrum are happy to gamble for resurrection. If you're losing, you've got nothing to lose. So the day traders and the people enticed by crypto and the people enticed by any number of other schemes almost guaranteed to lose the money. If it has the hope of escape from an otherwise low status position with limited opportunities and difficulty getting girlfriends, hey, they go for it. It's not so different from pimps and drug dealers. That is, that if you get high on status, however temporarily, you're better off in life, is if you're stuck here. And then finally on tariffs, we need to resurrect the 50s. My progressive colleagues like to tell me you can't say nice things about the 50s. You can only talk about the 50s if you say they're racist and sexist. But I say the 50s lay the foundation for the civil rights revolution and the women's movement. There is relative equality among white men. And what produces that? Unions. So what did unions fight for in the 50s? They fought less for higher wages. In the 30s, they fought for higher wages. But they fought more for job security. And precarity is one of the biggest things undermining our society. And I emphasize constantly. I'm going to be on a panel, my 50th college reunion. I'm very excited. And on the panel with me are a number of women who have, they were dancers. And then they got MBAs. And they work for Google. And they're now podcasters. And they reinvent themselves continuously. Because the top jobs in the economy for Princeton grads aren't that great. They're stressful, they're competitive, you're always looking over your shoulder, and at some point the time comes when you say, I don't want to do this anymore, and then you reinvent yourself. The ability to reinvent yourself is today a hallmark of privilege. But those who can't reinvent themselves are stuck in precarious jobs. And what Donald Trump, there are many things Donald Trump isn't telling people, but a big one, if he succeeded in creating more manufacturing jobs without unionization, what people think of as the manufacturing jobs they used to have, they remember fondly, were unionized. If you bring back the jobs where you're putting little pins in devices without unionization, it's like working for Walmart's. You're going to be exploited. And you're not going to get back what you thought you had, because what you had, the 50s, the 60s, was a product of a more egalitarian society with structures that supported the working man. The same people who brought you Donald Trump and bought the election effectively are the same people oppressing the working class. Any manufacturing jobs that are created, and they won't be as great as Trump brags about, and he's doing it the wrong way anyway. But if he succeeded in bringing back jobs from Mexico, then the workers would be paid what Mexicans are being paid. And that's not what they want.
Reality.
I want to take exception to that, too. I don't think that they would be paid as well or treated as well as people at Walmart, because the customers can actually see what's happening to the people in Walmart. But in the factory, nobody's going to be able to see what's happening there. There won't be an NLR. They've decommissioned the NLRB. They've decommissioned the Occupational Health and Safety Agency. So nobody will know what's going on in there. And it's going to be worse, much worse, because they will take advantage of secrecy.
Reality is a bitter pill to swallow, guys. And Bill, you and I had discussed last week. I mean, between you and Mark, and also really collectively, this group of new Untouchables has progressively introduced more and more innovative and dynamic ideas how to deal with this insanity of all things, the centralization of corruption and the power base of the federal government. But you've come up with an idea of fight, the diffuse reaction in a brilliant way that gives us, anybody who is not on the side of this betrayal to the United States, an opportunity to shine light in ways that are otherwise quashed, right? Can you walk us through fight?
Yeah, but let me put it in the context of today's discussion, right? Because we haven't closed the loop. What we've all been explaining is how the Trump has gone to a policy of brazenness, of in-your-face corruption, right? They barely try to hide it. In fact, typically they, as I said, are advertising it. Well, we have folks on this panel who, in the past, if people did not even 1/10 the brazenness of these frauds, much less the size of this fraud and corruption, which in dollar terms is just staggering compared to the past, what would have happened? We would have sent them to prison. So they are desperate never to allow America to reemerge. Because if America reemerges before the statute of limitations runs, any sane new president, both substantively and because it would be enormously attractive to the public, and it would disclose to the public on a daily basis in testimony, the most compelling thing, because this is what prosecutors do. They tell a story, right? They don't just have a recitation of facts. They tell a story understandable to normal human beings. They don't use necessarily big words at all. And the best of them, like the folks in this panel, are really good at taking complex things and making them understandable, where you get, hey, this guy's a thief. He's stealing. And we're the ones who are going to hurt. So they cannot allow us to retake America. And therefore, the fight agenda that you talked about is exactly what they fear on steroids. Because what we're saying, and three of us have considerable experience in this, is it ain't just Trump. For at least 30 years, the Supreme Court and the Congress, in many, many Congresses, and quite a few of the presidents, have deliberately made it much harder to actually get convictions or even large civil judgments against these elite CEOs and their corrupt public official allies. So they're going to fight us tooth and nail to try to stay out of prison, not just to stay with their grift and their money. Because when we send them to prison, often we also bankrupt them. Now, often. There are many cases where they
Some of
end
these
up with
guys,
their millions.
I don't know, Bill. I don't think so. Not with this crew.
Yeah, actually, under the proposals that I'm making, we would. The kicker is the judiciary, and I'll say frankly, the Supreme Court has to be broken of its allegiance with the corrupt, right? We cannot do business as usual with the Supreme Court. It once again, as it has almost through our entire history as a nation, has failed the nation in favor of these really elite predators. But you're right. That's part of the reason the Fight Act is, again, and this comes back to the Supreme Court, we cannot have a situation in which corporations are treated as people with a First Amendment right to make essentially unlimited contributions, given all the different kinds of devices. And now the contributions can be blatantly bribes, right? They don't even bother with the pretense that it's a contribution anymore. They just, as I said, are setting up a bidding war for bribing them, right? So we are going to have to be vastly more radical in our response to this to actually break this corrupt system and restore an America that actually works and a Supreme Court that actually works, that again, through most of its history, has failed our nation. So let me just add a new thing. So each of these sessions, I try to add something that we can do. Law students, stop going to interviews with the firms that bent the knee. Or better yet, go to the interview, sign up all the top students for the interviews, go to them and tell them exactly why you think they suck and that you'll never work for them and such. That's one. Two, all kinds of good causes. Go to the firms that bent the knee and ask them to do pro bono work on behalf of America. All your good causes and such, and document that they all said no. They said no to this and this and this and this and this and this. All these good things for the world, they consistently said no to so that they could say yes to Trump. And then I still say if we can pass conflicts, go to the firms that stood up to them. Hire them for appropriate actions. They actually do have superb attorneys, superb litigators, right? I think all of us on this panel have worked with those people that, in many cases they were classmates, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Let's build a broad network of folks who are pushing. And so, for example, if you're going to have, and God bless it, perfect idea and the right phraseology, no kings, well, have a plan, right? We can give you a plan like the FIGHT program for what we need to change in order to make no kings a reality. Although I will say, law can never make it king-proof. It always takes the American people, and that's our broader mission, getting the American people to understand how bad kings are.
Yeah, Paul, I was going to say, Paul, take us home because you were one of the top prosecutors in this country to the American jury of the American people.
I agree with everything Bill said, and I agree that we have to give it to the American people. I have a little bit of a different take, though, on what's going to be necessary to do that. Everybody that voted for Trump knew he was a convicted felon. They voted for him anyway. And he ran against a former state attorney general, clean as a whistle. They didn't give a shit. They voted for someone who they knew was a convicted felon. Why? Because he convinced people that he was one of them. And of course, we all know the MAGA cult group. That's always going to be that way. I think that we can talk all day long about how we need to fix this through the legal system, the justice system, and that type of thing. But as long as Trump has control of our Department of Justice and in essence, some of the judiciary, I think that we have to make a serious effort on getting the American people to understand this corruption affects them. So, we can sit there all day and say, look at Trump is committing crimes and he's doing ideas. American people knew that and they still fucking voted for him. So obviously not everybody, but enough to get him over the wire. So one of the polls that stays the same all the time is people do not like billionaires, right? And they just don't like, and they don't want billionaires to control the country. So we need to convince the American people, when I say we, I mean, I'm mostly talking about Democrats, need to convince the American people that this corrupt administration is catering to the billionaires and not them. Because if the American people don't vote these bums out, we can do whatever the heck we want for the next 10 years. And we're going to be banging our head against the wall, bitching and moaning about all this corruption because it's there. So unless and until we convince the American people that that this corruption is affecting them in a real way. And I think that we'll get a lot of help in that regard. And I think that help we're going to get is I think that the economy and what this bill this big, beautiful bill that they're passing through is really going to screw the mainstream Americans. People who make under $400,000 are going to get a tax increase. People who rely upon Medicaid insurance are going to be denied insurance for a lot of reasons. People are having trouble already getting in touch with their Social Security Administration people. So I think the administration is going to do us a lot of favors in that regard. But I think unless and until we convince the American people that this administration could give a fuck about them, and like I said, they're going to help us in that regard because this economy is really going to drain them. I think everything else we're talking about, I think people knew that's who they were getting, and they voted for him anyway. So I think that it's sort of I think we have to capture the hearts and minds of the American people in a real way first, and get these people out of office. And this starts in the next term. That's my 2 cents.
All right. Well, I know you got to split. I'm going to.
I don't have to split for another 10 minutes. But.
Okay. Well, then I'm going to turn this back. June, I noticed that you were about to make a comment. Did you have something to say off the back of that?
Yeah, several things. First, in terms of things that are going to affect people, the U.S. bond rate, the U.S. credit rating just got downgraded. We are no longer AAA. Now, the person in the street is not going to understand any of this. So one of the things that needs to be done is alternative media. Here we are, contributing to that, I hope. Secondly, and something that inspires me a lot are the podcasts from rural Missouri, the Iowa Revolution. They're trying real hard to talk to local people about things that affect them. And one of the messages in rural Missouri is they're out to kill your schools. They're going to gut your health care. They're going to kill your schools. They've been trying to do it. They're down to 4 days a week because they can't afford to stay open that much longer. The turnover in teachers is enormous. This is intentional. It is not a accidental effect. But linking what Trump is doing, I mean, Musk is the great gift. The problem with the billionaires has been for all that they're famous as celebrities. Musk makes real, he's screwing you. And that's something we have to run with. And finally, what I was going to ask, when I think of my dedicated colleagues in law school a zillion years ago, what they ended up doing was opening their own firms. And in that era, a lot of them did consumer protection. Consumer protection is something you could make money doing, being on the right side, calling attention to people who are ripping off consumers. My students today want to know, where can they have an impact? When I look at the history, as I said, I was listening to a podcast this morning on securities laws. Why can we not call Elon Musk to account? Well, Congress in the 90s gutted a lot of private security suits. They're expensive to bring. Juries often don't find liability even where there's persuasive evidence. But when you can make a living to bringing these suits is when the public sees the financial crisis caused by greed, caused by Elon Musk, and then you follow up with the lawsuits that hold people to account in ways that the public understands because they've lived through it. And so what I see that connects a lot of what we're talking about, how do we do things, is we need instruments of accountability that are tied into social media that identify the wrongdoers and connect it to the potholes. Your pothole is not being fixed because we're busy giving tax breaks to the billionaires. And the billionaires don't want regulations so they can rip you off. How do we get that message through?
Right. Well, to me, it's always been easy. I mean, what I'm seeing and what I thought everything that you guys have revealed throughout my entire apparatus with you is that when you wage war on the law, you create corruption, and corruption is a betrayal to the law and all that what makes the United States what it is. That's why we were born, to be in, a revolution against the corruption of tyranny, right? I mean, that's just the very basics. And so they're waging war on all that is good. And that's it. If you don't understand that, then you should actually check yourself and learn why that is the ultimate statement, because everything that makes it possible for us to have a fair baseball game and our children to grow healthily and, grow and get an education, everything else, all that is under siege, right? For everybody, not just.
But I got to push back. But what does that got to do with the price of eggs? I'm paying. I'm serious about this. People, you're talking about a much higher level than most voters give a shit about.
Okay.
It's a reality.
But I was using that to set this up, though, because see, Mark and Bill have laid out in the last couple of weeks very detailed analysis of how to turn the tables in a couple of different ways. A, as it relates to Mark Dan's law firm and what he has offered the American people to build on this, is that small businesses that are being destroyed by tariffs, that his law firm will help to develop initiatives to push back on the administration as long as they're standing, right? And so we identify those stories first and foremost. The other side was this ongoing discussion about what do we do to turn the tables on these tech platforms that are besieging America with lies, that just simply easily proven lies that are backstopped by these billionaire apparatuses that create this entire scheme. And so there's a couple of different methodologies there that we've discussed, and that's still ongoing that you guys will be involved with. But that then dovetail into this fight initiative that, the way I interpret it from Bill Black, that all of the corruption is central in the federal government because the DOJ and the FBI is under the thumb of this monstrosity. And so the only way you can do this is take this out in a diffuse way with these reverse turn the tables and flood the zone with however many cases it takes to be able to, champion the little guy who is being crushed by this fascism or some variation of Doge, and therefore, involved with the law schools across the country with some of June's contacts, where we get galvanized and get organized to be able to do what I think the entire nature of the American law and the sentiment of truth is about, right? Okay, so go ahead.
Did you see Rand Paul on the floor of the Senate the other day, rallying against this bill, this big, beautiful bill? What he said was, and look, I can't stand Rand Paul, but he is a libertarian, and he said, look, Doge is full of shit. They've done nothing. He said, why in the world are we raising taxes on people under 400,000 if Doge is actually getting rid of corruption and fraud? And he's like, and he said this right on the floor of the Senate, they're not. So that same message has to be told 1,000 times over about what Elon Musk is doing. And look at, and one other thing, look at what's doing in these deals, these deals that Trump is striking supposedly as a result of his tariffs. I read something the other day. They released some State Department cables in negotiating with the Gambia. One of the negotiating pieces was, if you buy Elon Musk's Starlink, we will negotiate these towers better for you. So it is unbelievable the grift that's happening out there and how it's not being exposed and converted to the American people in a way that's effective.
Right. So there are two things. Again, Bastiat was right. When people in society are the grift, they create laws that authorize it and a moral code that valorizes it. Okay? So Paul's absolutely right that a major part of our action has to be the economy. Now, here's the kicker. The great financial crisis, which built up overwhelmingly over Republican time periods, right? Biggest bubble in history. The estimated by just conservative economists, cost of that in present value terms is $41.7 trillion in lost productivity over the next 25 years. But what does that do? Well, Trump takes advantage of that and says, well, the economy isn't very good. You should appoint, I need to be in charge. Now, the guys that caused the disaster are benefiting from the disaster, and that's how bad the Democrats are. I mean, you want a messaging. You want it in a paragraph? That's how bad the Democrats are. They've allowed Trump to win on those issues. So yes, when Carville says this, the whole thing about it's the economy stupid, well, no, it's actually really a not complicated, but sophisticated task of not being sophisticated, right? Of talking to people as people, not like they're econ folks at a grad seminar where you say, here's what these policies do to the regular American person. And what they do is they cost enormous amounts. And Paul is also right that they're fucking up the economy, left, right, and center. And not just the US economy, but much of the global economy. And so, yes, the Democrats need to be pounding. And remember when I was suggesting don't do these conventional hearings, especially when you don't have majorities in either the House or the Senate. Don't have idiot politicians hogging all the time, asking the questions. Have actual people who are good at this, like Paul, like a number of those lawyers at those firms that refuse to bend the knee. Talk with one of the insiders that left the government because they saw all the corruption that Doge was creating, right? And present them locally, not with 4 minutes of questions by this representatives and 4 minute questions by the other representatives and all congressmen trying to get their face on time. Do it with real people that are good at it. And then see when you do this hundreds of times with many different whistleblowers in hundreds of congressional districts, who does a good job of it, a particularly good job. Have them go viral with the aid of social media at that juncture. Find out who can resonate and with different kinds of groups, different kinds of pitches, right? It isn't a one size fits all. It's a different skill, but it's an overlap of skills that lawyers and good journalists have. So use those folks. Just stop wanting the FaceTime of being a legislator asking some question
What
in
I
a
just saw,
disjointed fashion.
what I just saw there was Bill Black, Obi-Wan Kenobi with the Force, and let the Force be with all of us. And guys, I know we're out of time for this. I'm willing to stick around if anybody else is. I know that Paul, you got to take off, but I'll just say, my gosh, guys, this was lively. It was filled from top to bottom. So much more to come. These are going to be, delivered to the American people with regular frequency. We hope you share, like, and subscribe and spread the word. We've got the folks that have got the answers. What we need are the people to help invigorate and enlighten the rest of the population. So thank you for joining us all. All the best.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you
Vaya
later.
con Dios, Paul.